You're just going to look in there, take a look at the aperture, and then if you look at the numbers up here, okay, you're going to notice that it's opposite. The large numbers, small aperture. Small numbers, large aperture. Okay. Then the next thing I want you to take a look at, and you can just pass this around and I'll start to talk about the packet, is shutter speed. Okay, so the lens is off. You're not going to see the shutter on your digital camera. But the lens is off here, and up here there's a dial with a lot of numbers on it. It starts with 1 and goes all the way around to 2,000. Those are fractions of a second. So 1 is 1 second, and then a half a second, quarter second, then just eighth, and just keep getting faster and faster. If I go ahead and just take a look at this so you can do this when it comes to you. You're going to twist this over. That's supposed to advance the film that's not in here. And this is a really slow aperture. Okay? And you can look in there and you can see the aperture, or the shutter, sorry. 2,000 is 1/2000th of a second. It's a fraction. So, super fast. So I'm going to pass these around and just test it out. Just take a look at it. I think if you have something to hold in your hand, it'll make this just a little easier to understand. Abstract things sometimes take time to figure out. So if you see it literally here, it'll make, I think, the concept stick a little bit better. Okay? All right. Since most of you are on the last section where you're just kind of figuring out what the settings would be, let's start to talk about these concepts. Go along in the notes, because these are your notes for your test. And these are the topics we're going to start to discuss and focus on when we start to take pictures. You know, someone said, I'm glad he said it. He's like, this is kind of hard. And it is. Balancing these three things are challenging. Fortunately, the digital cameras make it a whole lot easier than the manual cameras that we used to work with. A whole lot easier, because even the settings, you just hit the button for the scene mode or things like that. Okay? So as that's going around, take a look up here. Let's talk about exposure.
Is actually going to take a picture?
Let's talk about exposure and how these elements work. So if you could have your notes out with you, get off the internet there or photo booth, etc., and just follow along, because we got to get these things. Anytime we're talking about taking a picture, we're talking about exposure. Okay? So exposure is that element that captures your picture. That's an exposure. When you look under the topic of exposure, you have three things that you're concerned about, that you learned about. You have your shutter, which some people are starting to experiment with on the camera now. You have your aperture. Some